I think that's one of the brilliant things of traveling to new places is that I'm able to, it helps me be so much more present, where you're walking with your nose up and like looking at everything versus like looking with your nose down.
Yeah.
Hello everyone, my name is Dr. Dylan Callier. I'm a physical therapist and welcome to the New Medical Nomads podcast, where I get to document my journey as a medical traveler, as well as interview other experts within the traveling field. Now, the rules for the traveling game are constantly changing, so anything you hear on this show should be for entertainment purposes only. This is not legal, financial, or medical advice. Enjoy the show and safe travels.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the New Medical Nomads podcast. I am your host, Dr. Dylan Callier, and today I have with me my very good friend, Brandon Leeker. You are not a traveler, but this is my show, and I get to do what I want. Brandon's been a very good friend of mine for 6 or 7 years. We lived across the hallway together in college, good lifting buddies, took a lot of classes together, and then for the past year, I've been living with him for a year, and he's been just phenomenal with all the support and encouragement for the podcast and other things I've been working on. So thank you so much for that. But do you mind telling the listeners a little bit about yourself, what you're doing career-wise? And then
Yeah. So I actually work for Square right now. What I do there is I should lead a team of about 14. They do phone support mostly. Before that, I had my own ventures in starting up a small business. I was also an operations manager actually right after college. We were in the same program. I finished with my bachelor's and took on other opportunities at the time that I had available. So it's kind of where I'm at now.
So today I want to talk more about, usually in this podcast, we go more into the hows, like how to do this, how to do that, the nitty gritty, detailed things on what to do in this situation. But I want to go more into depth with a lot of that and talk about the whys and the intents behind why we travel. And I feel like we've had a lot of conversations about that. That's usually what conversation topics are around. Yeah. So I thought you'd be a good person to have on the show. Something we talk about a lot is that question of what is your why? Mm-hmm. And that was something I wanted to bring up so much as to why do you wake up every day and do what you do? Why do you wake up every day and want to travel and want to see other places and things like that? Is it because you're wanting to see those places? Is it because you're wanting to make more money, meet other people? Maybe you're running away from something. I don't know. But can you talk a little bit about that and kind of how you ask that question yourself with all the business ventures and those leadership positions you have?
Yeah. So I think there's a fine line that you have to balance. So I think a lot of people might act too quickly. So they have this goal in mind that they want to do, and they just go out there and act. I think one bit of advice is act with intent. So take the time to think about it. So if traveling is your goal, ask yourself why. Like, what about traveling? Is it seeing other places? Because if you're doing traveling PT at the same time, you're doing a job. So you're not going to have all this free time that you think you might have all the time. And that might not be a bad thing. That might be in line with your goals. Maybe you can't afford to travel and this is like your way to do it. But I think setting the right expectations before you go out on a new adventure. So like, what's your intent? Like, what do you expect to get out of traveling? I hear people, not even doing anything traveling, but like anything with their career where they're like, oh, well, I'm going to make a lot more money. And I ask them like, well, what's a lot of money to you? Is this your goal? Is this the best way to do it? So act with intent, but at the same time, be sure to also act too. I see people overthink things. And I think they spend so much time thinking you'll never have a perfect scenario unless you go out there and overcome obstacles. If something was perfect all the time, you'd hear about so many people like chasing their dreams and all that. People wait too long. So at the same time, act with intent, but be sure to seize the moment too. So once you know it's something that you want to do, you honestly just have to go for it. Yeah. So I think with that, when setting a goal, I think so many people are also caught up in the goal side of things too, that they don't look at the time of like, why is that their goal? So in that same aspect, and I think a lot of people accomplish a goal and then it's not what they thought it would be. So they accomplish this big old task, whether they're starting up a business or whatever it is, and like, oh, I'm working 50 hours a week, I'm doing this. But I think if you act within your values, which I don't think a lot of people spend time actually like establishing what their values are, which can be challenging. So once you establish your values, you then not only have satisfaction of completing that goal, you also have satisfaction as you're actually going towards it too, because you know that you're already acting within your values before that goal is even completed.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would say, reflecting back on that, be a doer, not a thinker type of thing. I'm definitely one that overthinks things and overanalyzes. And you were a big push to just start the podcast and just see where it goes. And so once you start, after that, that's like the big point. Once you get started, it's fine. It just flows. But just that first, like just initially getting started. One of the habits that you have is we'll be kind of lounging around or whatever, and you pick like 5 things to do. Can you kind of talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So Mark Manson actually has a philosophy. It's slipping my mind at the time. It's called the do something principle. It's as simple as it sounds. If you have a lot of work in front of you, commit to a certain number. I picked between 3 to 5. But so he talks about like doing emails, like reply to 5 emails. And by the time you're actually done, you'll feel more motivated to do more. And the concept behind that is a lot of people feel like you need to have inspiration to have the whole like being motivated to do something, and then the action comes. But because so many people see satisfaction from action and actually completing things, you can actually then kind of kickstart that whole loop to where once you do something and complete it, even something small, you're like, oh, that felt really good. Mm-hmm. And now you're actually getting motivated. Now you're in the loop that you thought you wouldn't be in to start with. So, it's as simple as, around the house, just like cleaning like 3 dishes or like whatever that is, like something super small, but then you're done, you're like, oh, that wasn't that bad. And then you just keep going. So it kind of creates like this whole like loop. And once you're in that, it just really makes you productive. And I think taking that to a different scale, just applying that. So when you were starting the podcast, just committing to 3 things, like what 3 things are you going to do to actually get this started?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think just, getting those started was getting the website set up, buying the microphone, and then just getting used to recording myself, which is super awkward when you start out. It's just like, oh my God, this is what I sound like. How do people listen to me? We're recording this on the first day of January 2018. Mm-hmm. And so there's a lot of New Year's resolutions going around. I personally don't like New Year's resolutions because I think that's something you should do throughout the year, not just like, oh, this is the first and New Year, new me type of thing. How do you feel about that? And then when you are doing those reflections, we can go into that one goal or exercise that we were talking about.
Yeah. So I think when you're thinking of setting a new, so let's say it's today and you want to set like a new goal. I don't think any time's ever a bad time to start, but if you're setting a date in the future, ask why. Like what's preventing you from doing that today? So, if it happens to be January 1st, go for it. Mm-hmm. But if it's December 27th, you're like, oh yeah, in 4 days I'm gonna do X, Y, Z. It's like, why in 4 days? Like, what's this magical like 4-day number? It's not gonna be any different. And a lot of people, like we've talked about, are waiting for that perfect scenario. And looking on both sides, like, yes, things might get better, but things also might get worse too. So do you want to be 4 days ahead or 4 days behind? So it's kind of how I look at it. I think that's one of the big things, is just really like identifying, like, again, what's your why? Like, why do you want to do this? And actually, what's stopping you from doing it now? That's a big part.
And so that's something I kind of do, is reflect on myself, what I'm doing about every 2 to 3 months. If I don't, I tend to feel like I'm just kind of in a hamster wheel just running, and I kind of lose focus. And so that's usually what I do, just kind of regather myself, take a day off, and just think. And you had come up or brought to my attention the 3 values exercise. Can you describe that a little bit?
Yeah. So I think kind of talking about values and what values do really well is make sure that you're going along the path that you want to do. But I think what's hard, I think we all have that bias of like a value that we want to embody, because we've either been told it's a great value to have or whatever that may be. So I actually heard of this exercise that I think works really well to actually identify your true values. And basically what that is think of someone from a personal standpoint, a professional standpoint. So personal being like a friend or a mentor, like something along like those lines. Professional could be a boss. It could be someone that owns a business that you respect. And then the third one, someone, if you're interested in a relationship, someone from that perspective as well too. Imagine that you're talking to them and they then are complimenting you, not on your work, but on your values. Like, what would they say? So let's say you really admire and respect Bill Gates. If he's sitting in front of you and he's not commending what you did as far as a project, but commending like, hey, I think you're really brilliant and creative, like what would that be? So first you have to find out like each person, like who would that be sitting in front of you? And if they were complimenting you on your values, what would they say? That made it much easier for me. And I think what it did is it disconnected my own bias from my values. So then I could actually hear what I wanted to hear if someone was complimenting me. So that really helped a lot.
Got it. And yeah, when I went through it, it's kind of interesting how well it lined up with the podcast, but it was professionally talking, it was communication. I've always admired people who can talk to patients and tell them exactly what's going on in a way that they can understand, and then also motivate them in order to take charge of it. And that's something that I don't necessarily think I'm a great communicator, but it is a value that I have and something that I continuously try to work on.
Yeah.
Along with that is education. So being a good educator, same thing, motivating, getting the job done. And then also just being transparent. So not, hiding information or avoiding certain conversations because they're hard, just being brutally honest, but in a good way.
Yeah.
And so those are 3 professional ones that I had. And did you have any professional ones you want to talk about?
Yeah. Before I jump in that, I want to actually highlight something that you brought up. So as far as some of your values, you actually said like, hey, like, I don't feel like I do the best in this. And I think identifying values is not necessarily being the best in that, but knowing what you want to accomplish. I think values definitely aren't black and white. It's not something that you'll always have or you'll never have. So some days you might slide into it really well, other days not. But I think keeping values in mind that this is my goal is to attain good relationships and being transparent and things like that. So keeping that like top of mind and acting in accordance with that and not necessarily against that. So just something that if you do this exercise, keep in mind that you're not always going to have these like all the time. So I think from my standpoint, I think taking full ownership of pretty much everything I can is like one huge one for me. So I personally so I don't believe in like miracles or things like that, but I do believe in the law of attraction, not in a way that things magically fall in your lap, but if you're taking full ownership, you can see more opportunities come up. So I think full ownership is one. I'm really big on empowerment too. So I lead a team of 14, and I really have a strong belief that everyone wants to be successful. But I think people identify success differently. So as a leader, that's actually my job, is to empower them, find out what success means to them, and make sure that they have the tools necessary. And I think the last one is being transparent too. And not only like feedback I give, but also like mistakes I make, which kind of goes along with that whole environment side, and also full ownership. So.
And I really have always admired your communication skills as well, because I know that's something that's not always been natural to you. Do you want to hit on that any?
Yeah. I'll actually tell a story. Back in high school, probably my low point. I remember one day, I think it was sophomore year, it was in history class, and I got called on to read a chapter. And I was kind of a nerd back in high school. And not like a nerd like everyone picked on, but just the shy, quiet kind of nerd. And this teacher would call on people in the class just to make sure they're paying attention to everything. But if everybody was paying attention, he would still do it just to make sure it was kind of like spread out. Well, he called on me to read a chapter in front of the class. It was 4 or 5 sentences. Probably took me about 5 or 10 minutes to get through because I was stuttering so bad. There's a lot of it was really, really bad at the time. And I think at the time I cared a little bit too much what people thought. So I have to slow down sometimes. I still catch myself sometimes. But that was a low point in my life. And it was so bad, and this isn't a high school scenario, it was so bad that nobody even made fun of me. That's how bad it was. It was awful. And it stuck with me. And I know some people are like, oh, like it should stick with you, like things like that. But you will fail at sometimes. So kind of going on those values, you're never going to succeed at everything that you do. Most people are really good at like a few things, and it's okay to fail. I think so many people are so afraid of failure that they never try hard enough to even fail in the first place. So go out there, fail, learn from it. And I don't think it was necessarily like the worst experience I've had. I think in some ways, like reflecting back on that now is actually a good experience to have. Whether it was comfortable or not is completely different, but it's kind of like, what do you want to endure in life? Like what like challenges do you want to face? Do you want to face the challenge of living with yourself or never actually chasing your dreams. And if you have kids one day, like, and your kids ask you, because it's bound to happen at like some point, like, well, what did you want to do when you grew up? And if you tell them, and then they ask why, how, and this is how I think, how can I explain that to my own kid if I didn't do that myself? Like if I tell my kid you can do anything, but then dad didn't even try, that's not something that I don't think I can do. So I think that's one thing. It's okay to fail, but to never even try enough to fail is one of my big things that I want to avoid.
Teddy has joined us, for those watching on YouTube. We're trying to make him go viral. Hi, Teddy. When I first met you, your stuttering was it was apparent. It was pretty strong, but within 2 years of college, you like knocked it out. I my previous views on stuttering and things like that, I always assumed you're just kind of stuck with them. But through watching you kind of go through that and conquer it, that allowed me, when I was a tutor at Maryville, to help out some other students that were struggling with that, because teachers were telling them, oh, you're going to have to get in front of people that you don't know and teach them things and stuff, and you might not be a good PT, which is like, I don't know. I think it could have been handled better, but being there to encourage them, like, no, you're not stuck with this. You can fix it. And for those speech therapists, I'm sure they know a lot more about this than I do, but Brandon was able to do it on his own. It's quite empowering, motivating.
Yeah. I think it's kind of like, especially in a place like that too, in a setting where you're learning and you're doing new things. It's really hypocritical to think that somebody can't improve on a social skill or anything like that when you're improving on those skills, like in the moment. Like you're increasing your knowledge, you're doing all kinds of things. And if you all haven't looked into growth mindset, that's something I would definitely look into. It's like the belief that you can get better at something. And really, like, if you look at the opposite, which is a static mindset, that I'm just smart, I didn't apply myself to be smart. Really, would you even be walking on? Like, no, you'd still be crawling around. Actually, not even crawling, you'd just be a little baby, like, sitting around. So it's just not something that's natural. So I think growth is natural. Again, I think people define growth differently. But to think that you're stuck with one thing is just really not true at all. And I think the big thing is just making sure, again, that you're acting in your values towards it. Otherwise, because you don't want to become somebody that you're not. And I think that's where identifying your values is huge.
Yeah, absolutely. So going into personal values, should those be the same as your professional values?
I would say it really depends. I think, so actually the company I work at, Square, is really, really big in work-life balance. We have people that are not happy with it, people that are really happy with the work-life balance there. But when you ask that, it's such a subjective thing. So some people love working, love just contributing and doing more. Other people want to experience more and see work as a means to an end. I don't think either is bad. But I think depending on how you define that, it will define if your personal values and your career values are the same. So if your personal values are live comfortably. So one of my core values that I have is to produce more than I consume. So I really want to give back more than I consume in my lifetime. So that spans both my career and my personal life. And I think it does that. My personal life is obviously more consumption, and my career life is more production. So it kind of spans the both and also connects them. I don't think it's bad to have a value that does that for either group, because if you are doing work as a means to end, you still have to make that connection of how it's that means to end. So I wouldn't say they have to be different. I would definitely say it's case by case. I wouldn't say there's a right or wrong. So if you do that exercise and somebody says the same thing, that's fine.
My personal ones ended up being a little similar. It was being direct, being an authentic person, and then also just having my congruency of intent. So kind of really focusing on that why, so that if I'm trying to be a minimalist or spend less money, but I'm buying shit that I don't need, then it's not going to be congruent with what I'm trying to do. Also, something you hit on is those goals that you set and those values. You don't want it to be where people have an influence on that or how you're viewed.
Yeah.
It's more of like what you live by, not like, oh, I want to be popular or something like that, just to be superficial, make it easy example. But also not having those goals of, you can have those goals if I want to build a business and have X amount of companies and X amount, and have those hard, good goals with numbers, because those do help. But again, you don't want to define success around that. You want to have your own values.
Yeah. So I think there's leading a successful, like meaningful life, which is led by values, and then like completing goals. The one thing you kind of touched on, and I think being popular is a great example. I always try to never, which that's a huge like grammar mistake I know. But in my experience, you never want to set a goal that's subjective to others. So if being popular is your goal, how are you going to measure that first off? Like, what is being popular? Like, what does that mean to you? But on top of that, is that something that you can even control? No, you can't. So if you want a goal that's actually like attainable, it needs to be able to be measured. And in my opinion, I mean, I guess like theoretically you could measure like by Instagram followers or like Twitter followers, like things like that. But again, it's subjective. Like not everybody's going to like you. And I think that's fine. But I think the way to overcome that is through your values when you're acting on your goals.
Absolutely. Let's get into how you kind of set your own goals.
Yeah.
So we've kind of taken a step back. We know our why. We know our core values. Now, what's the next step into developing those goals?
Yeah, so I think something I do, I live by a really simple rule to spend more time planning my life than a grocery list, which we've talked about. And it's a mistake I see like a lot of people make. And I don't think it's intentional by any means, but a lot of people spend more time planning on what they want to eat for dinner than what they want to do with their life tomorrow. So I just try to spend, I always devote a little bit of time just reflecting. And I think a really good exercise to do is past, present, future. What have I done? What am I doing now? And what do I want to do in the future? So that's one thing I do. Now the future goals you can set pretty far out. So the cap I put on myself is about 10 years. Like, what do I want to do 10 years from now? And what do I want to be doing? And then building kind of a plan towards that. So I build like a personal plan, like a business plan. I really think you should treat your own life like a business, and being an entrepreneur. If you actually look at the root of the word, this was in Terry Cruz's podcast, that the word actually means undertaker. So you undertake like a new task, which is like really, really cool. And so I think anybody can be an entrepreneur, and like pursuing that is really strong. But to do that, you have to like kind of plan it out at least a little bit. At the same time, the reason I like the past, present, future aspect of it is if you only focus on the future, you never live in the present at the same time. So I see people that are, every year I set a 5-year goal. It's like, well, when do you celebrate? Like when do you like take the time and actually like enjoy what you're doing now? So actually something we kind of did this past summer. One of my goals this past summer was to just do more like activities and like just have more fun over the summer. So we went ziplining a few times, boat trips, did all kinds of fun stuff. And so that was something, I think setting a goal for the now is also great. So then you can enjoy what you're doing now. Because if you're always setting a goal 5 years ahead, you're actually never living in the moment. And then next thing you know, you're 60 years old and you're like, oh, what do I do with my life?
I think that's something I find challenging. Is I've always been kind of a planner of like, what do I want in my future? Which I almost had to be for school, and then working multiple part-time jobs while I was in graduate school, things like that. Like it took planning and it took organization. But I think that's one of the brilliant things of traveling to new places is that I'm able to, it helps me be so much more present, where you're walking with your nose up and like looking at everything versus like looking with your nose down, thinking about, what you're doing tomorrow or what's the big chore that you have to do this weekend and type of thing. So I think it's a little bit harder for travelers in general to have those long-term plans. I know I struggle with that. I was just thinking, I was like, man, I know where I want to go for this contract. I know the area I want to go for this next contract. And then after that, that's about it. So that's about a 6-month plan. So I think, just being present, enjoying yourself when you're at those new locations, depending on your why, depending on your goal. If your goal is just to make money and, retire early, like some of the other guests I've had on the show, that absolutely can be doable. Just depending on what your life situation is and what your why is. I know we talked about Terry Crews.
Yeah.
You like him a lot. Are there any other podcasts, books, or personalities that have kind of influenced the way you think?
Yeah. So I think there's a few different ones I really like a lot. From like a hustle like aspect, Grant Cardone's like one of my favorites. He's in his 50s now. He started like from nothing, was addicted to drugs in his late 20s and like built like an empire from it. So if you're looking for like a way to like hustle and like motivate, Grant Cardone is one of my favorite. If you like more like case studies, and really looking at like building like habits and like a psychological aspect of like doing things, Charles Duhigg is one of my favorite characters. He is I believe a New York Times bestseller too with his books. But he does really, what I like about him is he actually takes case studies and like talks about like how to build habits that like through actual like research and things like that. So it's very structured. He's one of my favorite too. But yeah, I would say those two are probably my top two. They're big contrasts to each other.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I try to listen to as much as I can. So I actually do the audiobooks in my car. It's just easier for me. But I try to listen to as many people as I can from different perspectives and even people I don't like. But it's shocking how much of them actually parallel each other.
Right.
Just going through just everybody like talking. I think routines are huge in the morning and kind of planning and like goal setting and everything we talked about today.
Yep.
So
yeah. You want to talk about your goals?
Yeah. I have a few goals.
And before we get into this, this is something we've talked about, is that we've had our own goals, and it's almost gotten to the point where we almost don't talk about it because we're met with, I wouldn't say negativity, but doubt and just a lot of questions, and it's almost like you're defending it, and it just gets old. And so we really kind of developed a core group here where we just, we can tell each other goals, and we're, supporting each other, saying not so much like asking questions, but in a constructive way.
Yeah, challenging.
Yeah. Like, what about this? How are you going to scale? Which is something that your book's been really good at. But yeah, you want to get into your goals? Yeah.
So I think one of my main ones over the next like 5 to 10 years is 5 different sources of income. And really what I want to do with that. So I've been in a situation in the past where I relied solely on a business for like all of my income. And I came to the point one day they slapped me with a NDA and a no-compete, which basically said, so I was actually starting my own business at the time. They basically said, shut down your business or you're done. And at that point, regardless if I knew my business was going to fail or not, which I had no idea at the time, I didn't want to work for somebody like that anymore. I just didn't want to work for somebody that was so controlling. I think that was a turning point in my life where I have a great career now, but at the same time, with like a flip of the switch, it could all be gone.
Yeah.
And I think I've realized that over time. So my goal is really creating 5 sources of income to really like stabilize my life overall. I've shared with you really what I want to do with my work is work for entertainment and leisure and things like that. And then I'm investing in stocks right now, real estate, hopefully in the next year or two. And most of that income ideally would be towards bills and things like that. So then when I do work, I could basically work any job I wanted. And the harder I work, the more I get to play, basically.
Yeah.
So,
and I, along with my goals, which kind of aligns with traveling, not 100% where I want to be, but just the freedom of location. So I can go anywhere and do my work where I don't have to kind of stay stationary. Being from a small rural town, I saw a lot of the blue collar life, and I just want to gain those experiences and be able to have those experiences if I want. So I always think of like those commercials with the most interesting man alive. And when I get older, I want to have all the stories and I want to have all these experiences. And short term for 2018, I'm hoping to bring a lot more value into the podcast and to my listeners and my followers. Yeah. I'm pretty big with taking care of my people and helping out as much as I can, education, communication, those types of things. So if you're listening, keep up with the show. There'll be some hopefully exciting things here in the very near future coming up that I'm wanting to work on. And Brandon, did you have anything else you wanted to say on the podcast today?
No, I think wish Dylan luck. He's heading out Friday, so
yeah,
very excited.
I'm very excited. We had to sit out on the couch because I have everything packed up.
Yeah.
But yes, so if you're watching the show, you can find the official launches of these episodes on Facebook, the New Medical Nomads podcast page. We also have a group. I guess we got to add you on there now.
Yeah.
I'll add Brandon on there. So if you have any questions for him, you can go to New Medical Nomads group and just tag him in a question. And I'm sure he would love to reach out to you and help you out. Also, if you're watching on YouTube, on Stitcher, iTunes, whatever, you could just give us a like, give us a share, put down a comment of something you learned, maybe somebody that we mentioned that you followed or somebody that you'd like to follow. That would greatly get our information out there and our message out to the people that we're trying to reach. So thank you so much, Brandon, for joining. And for the past year, it's been awesome. We'll be staying in touch.
Yeah, I'm excited for what you're doing next year.
And for all you out there, safe travels.